In this video, I'll take the mystery out of how to do a personal budget, and we're starting right now. Hey guys, Elliot here. So what exactly is budgeting? And why did I make a whole video about it? Well, budgeting is a personal finance topic, and it's simply the process of setting a spending budget for yourself or for your family and following it closely. And the reason I made a video about it is that people generally aren't very good at doing those two things. Now, while I'm not under any illusions that the next 10-15 minutes will turn you into a budgeting expert overnight, there is some really valuable advice here in case you decide you want to reel in your expenses and live more within your means. So let's get into it, and be sure to stick around as later in the video I will list out the best software that can lend a hand and make budgeting easier and maybe even somewhat enjoyable. So a big part of talking about budgeting is talking about living expenses. Why is that? Well, take a look at the simple equation down here. If income is greater than living expenses plus debt, then you have money left over, which you can of course save, spend, or invest. There are three variables here: income, debt, and living expenses. Now, of course, it's always a great idea to increase your income, whether it's a new career, starting a business, or advancing at your current job, but generally your income is fixed and steady at any given point in time and not easily adjustable right away. Same thing with debt. It's always a good idea to pay it off as quickly as possible, but debt payments are also generally fixed and steady at any given point in time until, of course, a debt is paid off. This leaves living expenses as the big variable and the one you can control the most. And it's here that good budgeting really helps to keep more money in your pocket. Since living expenses are the centerpiece of budgeting, you need to understand what they are and what percentage of your income they should take up. You can then plan a budget and analyze it to understand where you may be overspending. With that in mind, there are 5 basic categories of living expenses: cost of housing, cost of transportation, cost of food and personal items, cost of clothing, and cost of entertainment and recreation, or just E&R. Let's take a closer look at each one of these, with the first one being cost of housing. Housing, for our purposes, is of course where you temporarily or permanently reside and have to pay for. Payment for housing can be with rent or mortgage. How much of your income should be spent on housing? With zero debt, financial advisors suggest that no more than 30% of your gross monthly income should go toward housing. So for example, if you gross $5,000 per month, rent or mortgage should be no more than $1,500. If you do have debt, housing costs plus the debt should not exceed 43% of your gross monthly income. So for example, if you gross that same $5,000 per month, rent or mortgage plus the debt payments should be no more than $2,150. If you have significant debt that will push your combined outlay above 43%, then you really need to take a look at less expensive housing or share costs. How do you reduce the cost of housing? Well, if you already own a home, consider long-term rentals, so in other words roommates, or short-term rentals such as Airbnb to defray mortgage costs. You can also refinance your mortgage if lower rates are available, or shop around for a lower home insurance rate. Finally, you can try appealing your property taxes with a reassessment. Now, if you're shopping for a home, consider a smaller residence or one farther from the center of town. Do your best to put down 20% to avoid PMI, and always shop your mortgage carefully to get the best rate. If you're renting, some of the same approaches apply, such as picking a smaller, less expensive apartment or one in a less convenient location, and you can also consider roommates to split costs. Finally, for both renters and homeowners, do an income and expense review to see if a second income stream is possible, as well as what expenses can be cut. Okay, so what about cost of transportation? This refers to the cost of owning and operating a car, the cost of mass transit, or a mix of both. If you are living, working, and have all services within walking distance, you may not have this expense, although if you occasionally rent a vehicle or use Uber or Lyft, this will need to be included. Now, to get specific, owning and operating a car can include car payments, if you have any, as well as insurance payments, cost of gas, maintenance, upkeep, and parking if you have those specific expenses. Mass transit can include fares for commuter trains and subways, as well as ferries, buses, taxis, and ride shares. So financial advisors suggest that no more than 15% of your net or post-tax monthly income should go toward transportation. For example, with the previous $5,000 per month gross income and a take-home net of $3,400 per month, transportation expenses should be no more than $510. If your personal vehicle costs come in significantly higher than the 15% recommendation, it's likely you financed or leased a vehicle that's too expensive for your income. How do you save on transportation costs? Well, if you're shopping for a car, don't buy new. Instead, go for historically strictly reliable used models, and if you can, downsize the vehicle. Shop your car loan carefully and use bank or credit union financing, not the dealer. Consider a vehicle's fuel mileage when purchasing, as gas is a major expense. If you already own a car, look into refinancing the loan if a lower rate is available. Save on auto insurance by maintaining a ticket and accident-free record, and only carry the mandatory liability coverage if you own the vehicle free and clear. If you want a bit of an unusual idea, rent your car out occasionally on a site like Turo.com, or drive occasionally for Uber or Lyft to offset or even completely cover the monthly payment. For mass transit, it's a bit trickier to save money as the costs are fixed, but you can do a comparison between all the available options in your area like train, bus, or ferry, and buy the cheaper monthly tickets instead of paying as you go. Finally, if it's practical in your case, don't forget the old standby that has been around forever, and that is carpooling to share the cost of getting to work. Next, we'll take a look at the cost of food and personal items. Food is a very individual thing. While we all have to eat, everyone places a different value on it, and what they consume will vary widely in quantity, quality, and cost. Included in the food budget are personal non-food and non-clothing expenditures. So how much of your income should be spent on all this? No more than 25% of your net or post-tax monthly income should go toward food and personal items. This breaks down to 10 to 15% for food and 10% for personal expenses. So for example, if you net $3,400 per month on a $5,000 per month gross, food and personal item expenses should be no more than $850. If your food and personal items budget exceeds 25% of your monthly net pay, there are some ways to save. Right at the top of this list is learning how to cook, as that will absolutely save you money. Thank you, Grandma. Other specific ideas include getting a membership at Costco, Sam's Club, and other such bulk retailers, and purchasing quantity. Do an inventory of what you need prior to shopping so you don't overbuy. Always check the per unit cost at supermarkets and comparison shop. Always get generic items unless you have a need for a specific brand. Stay away from processed prepackaged foods, they're more expensive. Look for sales, all stores run them. Shop for what is in season, and finally, do not shop when hungry. You will end up purchasing far more. Okay, next is the cost of clothing. Like food, clothing is also a very individual thing, and it is here that needs and wants can diverge quite a bit, with local weather and climate playing a big role. So how much of your income should be spent on clothing? Financial advisors recommend no more than 5% of your net monthly income. So for example, if we go back to the $3,400 per month net, clothing expenses should be no more than $170 per month. If your clothing budget does exceed 5% of your monthly net pay, there are some ways to save, and the best advice is to buy simple, sturdy, non-designer labels and take care of what you own. Avoid fast fashion, or in other words, cheap clothing that is meant to be thrown away. Other specific ideas include buying clothing out of season, shop used clothing at thrift shops, shop sales and clearances, rent once in a while items instead of buying them, avoid dry clean only clothing, it'll cost you a fortune in upkeep, sell off unwanted but still wearable clothing to consignment shops, and finally take fixes to a tailor instead of throwing something away. Okay, the last category to cover is entertainment and recreation, or just E&R. And as I get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe so I can keep bringing you these personal finance and investing videos. E&R is a wide-spanning category that includes going out, traveling, attending events, and day-to-day entertainment. How much should be spent on this? Well, financial advisors recommend no more than 5 to 10% of your net monthly income. So for example, going back to the same $3,400 per month net pay, E&R expenses should be no more than $170 to $340. If your E&R budget exceeds 5 to 10% of your monthly net pay, there are a bunch of ways to save, but much of it does depend on your priorities and what is important. Here are just some ideas. Cut your cable. There are many streaming alternatives. Eat and cook at home more and save on expensive restaurants. Use free sources of music such as YouTube. When it comes to movies, go to matinees or wait until the movie is streaming. Spend more time hiking and camping at low-cost national parks. If you like sports, attend minor league or college sporting events to save a ton of money. And finally, if you like zoos, museums, and amusement parks, go on off weekdays and look for promotions and discounts. Okay, so you got some great knowledge of expenses, and we can now put together a basic budget and expenses overview. For that purpose, I made up Dave. Dave is a 26-year-old college grad and works as an accountant in a medium-sized company, pulling down a $60,000 annual salary. He rents an apartment and lives alone, and his only debt is his car payment. His commute to work is fairly short, and he has low transportation costs but high food and clothing expenses as he likes to work out and go out. Here's what his budget and expenses look like. The starting point, of course, is Dave's $60,000 annual salary, which after all the deductions ends up being just under $41K, and that is the net income that he has to work with. From there, his biggest cost, like it is for most people, is housing, coming in at 26% of his gross income. This is actually pretty good, so he likely doesn't live in California California, where a housing crisis has upped that number to over 50% mark for some people. His transportation expenses, coming in at 13% of net, are fairly good, so he likely bought an affordable car. When all is said and done, however, you can see that Dave only has about $240 left over at the end of the month to save or invest aside from his 401k, which isn't all that much. If I were Dave's financial advisor, I would recommend to try to save money on food costs, which may involve buying things in bulk and learning how to cook. He could also look into how much he spends when going out. Overall though, Dave's situation isn't too bad. And this is how you use a budget, to see what expenditures you have and where you can save and cut spending. There are of course other approaches to budgeting and other percentages that financial experts have recommended. One example is called the 50-30-20 rule and first appeared in a 2005 book by former Harvard professor and current US Senator Elizabeth Warren. She recommended that 50% goes to needs, 30% to wants, and 20% goes to saving and investing. Another approach is called zero-based budgeting. It simply says that income minus expenses equals zero and all income must be assigned a purpose. This means the paycheck is immediately divided into bills, followed by non-essential spending, and the rest is saving and investing. No money is left sitting around that isn't assigned a task, thus impulse spending is curtailed and a stricter personal budget is maintained. How exactly you do your budget is ultimately up to you, but the goal is always the same, and that is to identify and track what you're making and spending, which will allow you to live within your means and reach your financial goals. Finally, as promised, let's talk about the software out there that helps you budget. Now, the key words here are helps you, not do it for you, as you still need to enter truthful and relevant data and then follow the projected budgeting and spending. Budgeting software is great for keeping track of expenses and letting you know exactly where your budget is at, but of course it won't do the heavy lifting for you, and it's you who will have to execute what is planned. As always, there's no endorsement applied here, I'm just letting you know what is out there. The first software I will mention, Microsoft Excel, is not really budgeting software per se, but it is very powerful and very flexible, allowing you to create your own formulas and spreadsheets, and it's great for those who just want to do their own thing. If you're looking for something much more customized for personal finance, the biggest name on the block is Quicken. This software has been around for over 25 years, and these days it does just about everything, including retirement planning assistance and helping you run a small business. It's on a subscription model only now, and the personal version comes as Quicken Simplify or Quicken Classic Deluxe or Premier. There is also a business version, if you can check them all out at quicken.com. For those looking for something more user-friendly and focusing on budgeting only, there is You Need a Budget, pronounced as YNAB. This online and mobile software, which is subscription only, follows the zero-based budgeting philosophy of giving every dollar a job, and it's very highly rated among users. Check it out at YNAB.com. Finally, we have the old standby AceMoney and its free cousin AceMoney Lite. This is very well-known, old-school software that is a one-time purchase, not a subscription service. It specializes in personal finance with extensive income and expenses tracking abilities. The latest version also helps you out with your investments. You can find AceMoney and AceMoney Lite at mechcad.com. Okay, that was a complete survey of the art and science of budgeting and saving, and I hope you really enjoyed this tutorial and got a lot out of it. Please do consider subscribing to the channel, and I will see you in the next video.